Welcome to lecture number 26. In lecture 23, 24, and 25, we did the concept of budgetary planning. We did what a budget is, budget की क्या types होती हैं, for example, what is an operating budget, what is a financial budget. Then we also did how you make the budgets, how you use output of one budget to make the input for the next budget. So that all those concepts we did in lecture 23, 24, and 25. In lecture number 26, we will start with the concept of budgetary control. One of management's functions is to control company operations. Control consists of steps taken by management to see that planned objectives are met. We now ask, how do budgets contribute to control of operations? आपको पता है the main function of management is to manage. How it does? The management manages the business on behalf of the stakeholders. उसके लिए, if you remember, when we were starting the subject of cost and management accounting, we did the three functions related to management. One of those functions was control. Now, control consists of steps taken by management to see that planned objectives are met. Once you have planned what you want to achieve, एक दफा आपने अपने goal बना लिए हैं, then obviously you will control the functioning of the organization to make sure that you achieve those goals. So, how do the budgets help the management in controlling the functionality and in controlling the performance of any organization? The use of budgets in controlling operations is known as budgetary control. Such control takes place by means of budget reports that compare actual results with planned objectives. What does it mean? It means, for example, if you remember, we made the sales budget in lecture 23, 24, 25. Once you have made the sales budget, and for example, the sales budget um, is for the financial period to 2021. So we can compare the budgeted sales figure for the first quarter of 21 against the actual figures that we will achieve. So that will be called using the budget report to evaluate your performance. The use of budget report is based on the belief that planned objectives lose much of their potential value without some monitoring of progress along the way. अब होता ये है कि once you have made a budget of the sales figures that you want to achieve, and obviously in 1 year, we have 4 quarters. So if the first quarter sales figures you are unable to achieve, so it is imminent and it is important that the management should sit together and try to figure out where did it go wrong. क्या वजूहात थी, क्या factors थे जिनकी वजह से you were unable to achieve your sales figure. So that is called monitoring the progress that you are making with the anticipated and the budgeted performance that you were expecting that you would be able to achieve. Budget reports provide management with feedback on operations. The feedback for a crucial objective such as having enough cash on hand to pay bills may be made daily. For other objectives such as meeting budgeted annual sales and operating expenses, monthly budget reports may suffice. अब होता है कि when you make budgets, so you make budgets for a lot of different activities, for a lot of different performance measures within the organization. हर एक को आप according to its priority, according to its importance, according to its relevance, आप हर चीज को उस frequency से monitor करते हैं. For example, if you want to see how much cash you have, so obviously cash you normally companies try to keep a record of cash every day. बहुत सी कंपनीज होंगी वो कहेंगे जो हमारा एनुअल सेल्स बजट है हम उसको मंथली और वी विल evaluate it quarterly. बहुत सी कंपनीज कहेंगी वी शुड evaluate it weekly. So in a nutshell, it varies from company to company how frequently you measure your performance against the budgeted one. But there is sort of a standard in the market कि किस चीज को आपने किस frequency से देखना है. Now, what is the budgetary control activities? होता यह है कि initially you have made the budget as we made in lecture 23, 24, 25. Once you have made the budget, then you analyze the difference between the actual performance and the performance according to your budget. Obviously, जो performance होगी, either it will be according to the budget, or it could be better than the budget, or it could be worse than the budget. So when you analyze the your actual performance against the budgeted one, you normally have three scenarios. It is either the same, it is better, or it is worse. So whatever outcome you encounter, obviously you will have to take corrective action. उसके हिसाब से you will have to take steps to make sure कि जो आपकी performance है वो in line रहे. And then once you have taken those steps, then you modify your future plans, and then you again make a budget and try to meet it. Budgetary control works best when a company has a formalized reporting system. The system does the following. It identifies the name of the budget report, such as the sales budget or the manufacturing overhead budget. जो obviously आपकी हर budget का एक report होगी, क्योंकि every budget report is based on a specific type of budget. It states the frequency of the report, such as weekly or monthly. आप जैसे उस report को generate करके study करना चाहें, तो उसके हिसाब से obviously you will have to decide. Then you should specify the purpose of the report, and you should indicate the primary recipients of the report. For example, if you have a report which is related to the production department, then obviously you will expect that the production department ka manager hai, manager should get a copy of that uh, uh, budget report. The manager should know कि उसकी performance जो है वो क्या आ रही है compared to the budgeted figures. Illustration 22.2 provides a partial budgetary control system for a manufacturing company. Note that the frequency of the reports and their emphasis on control. For example, there's a daily report on scrap and a weekly report on labor. अब sales की जो है normally you want to have it weekly, और इसका objective क्या है? Determine whether sales goals are met or not. And who should be the primary recipient? Obviously top management and the sales department, because जो sales department है आपका, sales department is the one directly dealing with the sales, so you want the sales manager to get a copy of it, and at the same time the top management, because sales department is the department जिसके थ्रू आप किसी भी कंपनी का रेवेन्यू जनरेट करते हैं, इनकम जनरेट करते हैं. It is an income generating department, so you have to make sure that the top management is always in the loop whatever the performance of the sales department is. इसी तरह आपका लेबर का आ गया, तो obviously you will have the vice president of production and production department managers होंगे सारे. स्क्रैप का है, स्क्रैप you want to make sure you keep an eye on it daily. उसकी वजह ये है कि you want to make sure कि जो आपकी मटेरियल का यूजेज है उसमें वो efficient है, there is no wastage in it. So obviously you want the production manager to keep a close eye on it. A daily manager production department is getting a report, and surely आप कहेंगे कि monthly or quarterly the top management should also have a look at the performance of the production department. उसमें waste कितनी है, कितना scrap generate हो रहा है, how efficient is the production of the company. इसी तरह आपके departmental overhead cost हैं, वो भी प्रोडक्शन डिपार्टमेंट को आ जाते हैं, डिपार्टमेंटल मैनेजर्स भी होते हैं. आपके जो सेलिंग एक्सपेंसेस हैं, द सेल्स मैनेजर शुड नो, बिकॉज द सेल्स मैनेजर हैज टू मीट द टारगेट्स. So the sales manager should know कि selling के expenses क्या आपके incur हो रहे हैं, और उन expenses के against what sort of sales are you achieving. If you feel कि you have to increase your sales, obviously you will try to invest more in your selling expenses. तो budget reports का another advantage is it tells you where you want to put in more money and where you should stop putting in money. So that is a very important use of budget report. Now, static budget reports. We learned in lecture 21, which is chapter 21, which is lecture 23, 24, 25. that the master budget formalizes the management's planned objectives for the coming year. We use the budgetary control. Each budget included in the master budget is considered to be static. Now, what is a static budget? A static budget is a projection of budget data at one level of activity. For example, हमने कहा था कि फर्स्ट क्वार्टर में लेट से आपकी जो सेल्स होंगी वो 200,000 डॉलर्स की होंगी. अब दैट इज अ स्टैटिक वन लेवल ऑफ एक्टिविटी है. दैट इज अ स्टैटिक लेवल ऑफ एक्टिविटी जो $200,000 का यू वर एक्सपेक्टिंग योर सेल्स टू बी. अब उसी $200,000 के हिसाब से यू मेड योर प्रोडक्शन बजट, उसके हिसाब से यू मेड योर डायरेक्ट मटेरियल, डायरेक्ट लेबर. सो ऑल योर बजट्स वर रिलेटेड टू दैट one level of activity, which is $200,000 in the first quarter of 2021, for example. These budgets do not consider data for different levels of activity. As a result, companies always compare actual results with budget data at the activity level that was used in developing the master budget. To illustrate the role of a static budget in budgetary control, we will use selected data prepared for Hayes Company in Chapter 21, budget and actual sales data for right product in the first and second quarter of 2014 are as follows. Now, if you remember, this same data we had in lecture 23, 24, 25. So we will again go through these data to understand the concept of static budget. आपने ये कहा था कि जो आपका फर्स्ट क्वार्टर में बजटेड सेल्स होंगी वो 180,000 की होंगी. सेकंड क्वार्टर में जो आपकी सेल होगी वो 210 क्वार्टर्स की सेल होगी. तो फॉर द फर्स्ट हाफ ऑफ द financial period you were expecting a sales figure of $390,000. when you compare it with the actual, तो आप देखते हैं कि actually आपका फर्स्ट क्वार्टर में you had sales of $179,000 and you had sales of 199,500 in second quarter. So the total sales that you were able to achieve were 378,500 against the budgeted figure of $390,000. The sales budget report for Hayes Company first quarter is shown below. The rightmost column reports the difference between the budgeted and the actual figure. Now your product line is, right, which Hayes Company sells. आपका budget था 180,000 का, तो जो actual sales were 179,000. Now what was the difference? Since the budget was greater than actual, so आपका unfavorable or it is also called adverse. आपका adverse था $1,000, आपका less था or unfavorable. The report shows that sales are 1,000 under budget and unfavorable result. This difference is less than 1% of budgeted sales. Top management reaction to unfavorable budget differences is often influenced by the materiality significance of the difference. अब आप देखते हैं इसमें जो आपका total difference है, it is less than 1%. For example, आपका जो total unfavorable है, that is 1,000. So since the difference is so immaterial, so we assume कि जो company है, it takes no specific corrective action because it is considered acceptable if you have an unfavorable result of less than 1%. Illustration 22.5 shows the budget report for the second quarter. It contains one new feature, cumulative year-to-date information. The report indicates that sales for second quarter is 10,500 below budget. This is 5% of budgeted sales. Top management may now conclude that the difference between budgeted and actual sales requires investigation. आपका सेकंड क्वार्टर में बजट वाज $210,000 ऑफ सेल, आपकी एक्चुअल सेल्स हुई 199,500 की. सो जो आपका अनफेवरेबल था दैट वाज 10,500. एंड ईयर टू डेट में we include for the second quarter and we also include for the फर्स्ट क्वार्टर जो आपकी फर्स्ट क्वार्टर की थी. उन दोनों को यू एक्यूमुलेट एंड यू कम अप विद ईयर टू डेट. So budgeted was 390,000, actual 378,500. So in the first two quarters, which is one half of the year, आपकी unfavorable sales figure था 11,500 का. Management's analysis should start by asking the sales manager the causes of the shortfall. Now you have to take some corrective measures. ये वही measures हैं which we discuss in this budgetary control activities. Once you have analyzed the budget with the actual, then you have to take some corrective measures. So in this case आपके corrective measures हो सकते हैं. You should ask the sales manager what is the cause of the shortfall. Managers should consider the need for corrective action. For example, management may decide to spur sales by offering sales incentive to customers or by increasing the advertising of rights. Or if management concludes that a downturn in the economy is responsible for the lower sales, it may modify planned sales and profit goals for the remainder of the year. Now, what the management is doing, once the management has found that the actual results are not up to the mark as per what you were forecasting or what was in the budget, so the management has to take some measures, some corrective steps in order to make sure that it can achieve its goals for the remainder of the year. So usme you have to first figure out the reasons behind this, you know, poor performance. Once you have found those reasons, then you should take the steps. So up till now, we have discussed static budgets. Static budgets reports a single level of activity. आपका ये जिस one level of activity था, this is called static budget. तो आप देखते हैं इस level पे आपकी cost कितनी थी, उसके हिसाब से you make the static budget. Now use and limitations. From these examples, you can see that a master sales budget is useful in evaluating the performance of a sales manager. It is now necessary to ask, is the master budget appropriate for evaluating the manager's performance in controlling cost? Recall that in a static budget, data are not modified or adjusted regardless of changes in activity. It follows then that a static budget is appropriate in evaluating a manager's effectiveness in controlling cost when the actual level of activity closely approximates the master budget level activity and or the behavior of the cost in response to changes in activity is fixed. आपका जो static budget है, it can only be useful if you meet these two conditions. एक तो आपकी होनी चाहिए कि जो आपका actual level of activity है, it should lie in close proximity to the budgeted level. और दूसरा, you should also keep in mind that the behavior of cost in response to changes in activity is fixed. For example, if your actual activity is more than the budgeted, so you have to make sure that जो आपकी cost का behavior था, for example जो आपकी fixed cost थी और जो variable cost थी, that was similar. Only in these two conditions can you say that the static budget is a useful way to measure the performance. A static budget report is therefore appropriate for fixed manufacturing costs and for fixed selling and administrative expenses. But as you will see shortly, static budget reports may not be a proper basis for evaluating a manager performance in controlling variable cost. Flexible budgets. In contrast to a static budget which is based on one level of activity, a flexible budget projects budget data for various levels of activity. In essence, a flexible budget is a series of static budgets at different levels of activity. So this is the positive feature of flexible budget. It is a series of static budgets at different levels of activity. आप इसमें, for example, if you remember, हमने कहा था initially कि if you had, हमारा जो budgeted output थी for the first quarter, that was 180,000. Now that is one level of budgeted activity. If you have more than one level of budgeted activity, so that will become a flexible budget. For example, you could have said, we'll have output of 180,000, we will have, sorry, sales of 180,000, or we will have sales of 200,000, or we will have sales of 220,000. Now what you have done, you have pinpointed three static points and you have tried to incorporate all those 3 points into your master budget. That is called a flexible budget. Flexible budgets can be prepared for each of the types of budgets included in the master budget. For example, Marriott hotels can budget revenues and net incomes on the basis of 60, 80, and 100% of room occupancy. Now, what we are doing for different companies, you can come up with different scenarios and different levels of output or yield, or usko, all those levels you can incorporate into your flexible budgets. Why flexible budgets? Assume that you are the manager in charge of manufacturing overhead in the assembly department of Baton Robotics. In preparing the manufacturing overhead budget for 2014, you prepared the following static budget based on production volume of 10,000 units of robotic controls. Now, what you did, आपने 10,000 units के हिसाब से you made this uh, मैन्युफैक्चरिंग ओवरहेड बजट आपने बनाया था keeping in mind the production volume of 10,000 units. Now, this is a static budget. Why? Because you have only taken care of one level of output. आपने कहा कि your budgeted production in units 10,000 है, so accordingly you know listed down all your expenses. आपके जो indirect थे expenses, क्योंकि as you know manufacturing overhead जो आपका होता है उसमें you do not include direct material, direct labor. You go for the only go for the manufacturing MOH expenses, manufacturing overhead जो आपके होते हैं. So आपने अपने indirect materials को list down किया, indirect labor, utilities, then depreciation, property taxes and supervision. So at the level of 10,000 आप expect कर रहे हैं कि you will have the total manufacturing overhead budget will be 1.1 million dollars, and it is on the output of 10,000 units. Fortunately for the company, the demand for robotic controls has increased, and Barton produces and sells 12,000 units during the year rather than 10,000. So you were expecting that you will have to produce 10,000, and you made the production budget keeping in mind that 10,000 figure. But since the market was healthy, so you were able to produce and sell 12,000 units. So in normal situation, that will be considered a very good indication. But when the company tried to uh, compare its manufacturing overhead with the budgeted manufacturing overhead, so it realized कि जो उसका actual manufacturing overhead था, that was higher than the budgeted. Now, why is it higher than the budgeted? उसकी वजह ये है कि the original budget was based on the output of 10,000 units, and you in the end you made 12,000 units. So obviously आपका जो budgeted था manufacturing overhead का, that should have been less than what you actually incurred. So now how do you कंपेयर इट? अब आप देखते हैं कि जो आपका बजटेड 10,000 था उसमें आपकी दिस वाज योर टोटल कॉस्ट, और व्हेन योर एक्चुअल आउटपुट वाज 12,000, व्हेन यू मेड 12,000 यूनिट्स, so this is the cost that you incurred. So you see there is a unfavorable outcome of $132,000. It means कि आपने $132,000 का you incurred more manufacturing overhead. But the problem is that you also made 2,000 units more. So now what you have to do? अब आपने देखना है कि if you make the budgeted for 12,000 units, so what was the actual story? So for this you compare the variable cost per unit. Why? Because you will see कि आपकी जो depreciation, property taxes and supervision है वो fixed part है आपका of your manufacturing overhead. So that does not change with the level of output. Only your indirect material, indirect labor and utilities change with the level of output. So what you do, you calculate your per unit variable cost, and then you calculate it कि आपको पता लग जाता है कि at 12,000 units what indirect materials you should have incurred. तो वो आपके 3 लाख के थे, indirect labor 3,112 है, utilities 228 की है. Then you compare this budgeted 12,000 with actual 12,000. So आपको उससे अंदाजा आता है कि you were able to save $8,000. It means कि आपका जो actual manufacturing overhead cost थी, that was 8,000 less than what you should have incurred according to the budget. So this shows that the company in the end did well. The manager, the production manager did a very good job. So that is the importance of the flexible budget. It can always tell you the real story behind the performance of any department or behind the performance of any manager. So this is the end of lecture number 20.